I invite Ulrich Breckville to come up and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, President Cathy. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the 28th Administrator of the United States Small Business Administration and fellow Atlantan, Kelly Loeffler, as our guest speaker today. I'd also like to add my welcome and recognition to her husband, Jeff Sprecher, who is here accompanying her. I think that the Administrator and Jeff are one of the few couples to each have previously addressed this club, and I believe Jeff will be coming back in the not too distant future. So it's great to have both of you here. Thanks so much. I'm going to keep this introduction short, as most of us know Kelly pretty well, but I do want to mention just a couple of highlights concerning her career and her achievements. Kelly's a self-made businesswoman who grew up working as part of a fourth-generation family on her family's farm in rural Illinois. From there, she went on to become the first in her family to graduate from college and went on to earn an MBA. Over a more than 30-year period, she has built a career in financial services and technology, turning small startups into Fortune 500 companies. At the Intercontinental Exchange, Administrator Loeffler held several positions on the executive leadership team, including SVP of Investor Relations, Chief Communications Officer and Chief Marketing Officer, and later served as the founding CEO of Bakkt, a fintech startup formed to bring institutional infrastructure to the crypto asset class. In 2020, we'll all remember, she was appointed to serve as one of Georgia's 2 United States senators. In that capacity, she brought her private sector expertise to bear in Washington. There, she championed conservative values, advocated for small businesses, and passed legislation to strengthen health care, veteran services, and drive economic growth. She was the first, and I believe to date only, chartered financial analyst to serve in Congress. Today, Kelly continues to empower small businesses in President Trump's cabinet as the 28th Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Please join me in a hearty Rotarian welcome to the 28th Administrator.
Wow, thank you all. It's truly humbling to be here. What your organization does is incredible. I'm always wowed by it. But particularly when Julyst just introduced me to the students here in the Knowledge Transfer Program, I mean, wow. And I asked what was the most important thing they had learned so far, and they said the value of building relationships. And that's truly what it's all about. So thank you for supporting these great efforts here. Obviously, I'm thrilled to be back here in my home state of Georgia. Been my home state now for 23 years, which, man, time has flown, but it does remind me that I moved here to work for a small business, a startup, that this state only this state uniquely can nurture as the #1 place to do business in America. And I just want to thank my husband, Jeff, for all his incredible support for me. I wouldn't be here without his support. He is, I get a lot of credit for public service, but it's often the spouse that has to make the biggest sacrifices, and thank you, Jeff. Obviously, Ulrich mentioned I served as our U.S. Senator. That was truly the honor of a lifetime, and I couldn't have imagined it being surpassed, but perhaps it has now, as the 28th Administrator and a member of President Trump's cabinet, particularly serving America's 34 million small businesses. It's 99% of all businesses in our country. So I truly feel motivated every day I wake up, and the work that I need to do to make sure that we're delivering for small businesses. And I think in just 6 months, the impact of putting America first and showing opportunity for all is possible it shows in the numbers, and no more obvious example than the fact that we just passed the largest working families tax cut in American history. We've got inflation at 4-year lows, 720,000 jobs have been added this year, and now hardworking families can get ahead again. We have over 15 trillion committed to investment domestically in just the first 6 months of this administration. So the American worker, American ingenuity is in demand like never before. We've seen it with business leaders flocking here from around the world. And I really think President Trump has solved some of the biggest pressing issues of our time already in 6 months. I mean, we see illegal border crossings have gone to their lowest numbers in recorded history. We're restoring American energy dominance, which we've come to find out is at the heart of any economic growth agenda. We're advancing peace in the Middle East. AI leadership is back within our grasp. We just passed the Genius Act. And it's not so much about crypto to me, it's very much about making sure the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. This means strength on a world stage. So as the administrator of the US SBA, probably what I'm most excited about, though, is the ability for this agenda to lift up small businesses. 99% of all businesses in this country, and they haven't had it easy for the last 4 years, but they know that President Trump is a businessman like them, that he understands free enterprise is the best system to help our small businesses, our workers, our families live the American dream. And it can certainly be stifled under big government spending, regulation, high taxes, high interest rates. These are all things that crowd out growth that is powered by enterprise, free enterprise and innovation. So you see Washington doing that today, and there's a lot of upside to be had, but I think the real opportunity is to make Main Street mainstream. And what I mean by that is that small businesses need to be celebrated for the innovation that they produce. Too often people think, oh, that's great, you're the head of mom and pop shops. Well, that's not it at all. 99% of all manufacturers in America are classified as small businesses. They're the innovation growth engines that this country needs to empower, and they have been disproportionately crushed by massive regulation and inflation and a lack of incentive to be in the workforce. And so we're changing that. Now, small businesses make up 44% of our GDP and nearly half of our workforce, but they're much more than statistics, and obviously it's all of you. Many of you are the doers, the creators on Main Streets that are making a huge difference. I certainly grew up in one, as Ulrich mentioned. I grew up the 4th generation, which is now 5 generations on our family farm. And sensing I was going to be a big expense, my dad started a trucking company the year that I was born. He looked at me and said, we need more cash flow. So, but that pipeline of growth and innovation my father brought to our small community, where the largest business was the grain elevator, the innovation that he brought by bringing a trucking company there to support that grain elevator, it was transformative for our family and for generations of others' families. But my parents didn't call themselves entrepreneurs. My parents had high school degrees. They didn't go to college. They worked hard every day. My mom often says, well, I was the janitor and the secretary, but she was really the COO of a 10-person small business in our community, while my father drove a truck and a tractor. Now, in our small town, not only do they create jobs, but they put food on our table. They helped me be the first in our family to attend college. I waitressed throughout high school and college in small Main Street businesses once I found out, after working in the fields, that there's air conditioning in restaurants, and I was done with that. So, look, I left the family farm to build a career in business after watching my parents. That's what I wanted to do. Got my MBA, went into venture capital, private equity, Wall Street. But the lessons I take with me, I learned in small business on that family farm. And it really inspired me to go on and become a founder myself. And then when President Trump asked me to be the head of the US SBA, I really felt my career and my life's work had truly come full circle, and it was incredibly humbling. SBA is probably best known for providing government-guaranteed commercial loans, so not government loans, but many bankers in this room, I'm sure, and we provide a partial guarantee on those loans across about 1,200 community lenders. Hopefully that number grows as we improve the program. We also help small businesses access government contracting. The largest purchaser in the world is the federal government, and small businesses have the opportunity to access about 23% of that particular marketplace. We also offer important business counseling services, and then finally, disaster relief. So when you think about the hurricanes that came through Georgia, FEMA's on the ground initially with grants that help the state deliver those recovery services, relief services, but we provide recovery. So we're providing government direct loans to homeowners and small businesses. And that's incredibly important. And I was just on the ground with President Trump in Texas, and truly my prayers and Jeff's are with those families. But when I arrived at the agency 5 months ago, I got sworn in 5 months ago, it was obvious we needed change. The SBA had drifted from its founding mission, and that mission is to advance the interests of small business and grow our economy. Pretty common sense. It was built during World War II, post-America World War II, when veterans were returning home very capable. They wanted to start businesses. This was a way to help them do that, become entrepreneurs. And once again, there's great urgency around restoring this mission because of what's happened in recent years. I mean, we had 40-year high inflation that was compounded by nearly $2 trillion of regulation. That means compliance costs on top of massive inflation, a $1 trillion trade deficit, and then just stagnant economic and job growth. And so at the SBA, unfortunately, the mismanagement was equally dire. When we arrived in January, we had a bloated bureaucracy on our hands. The agency was bleeding cash. It's supposed to operate at zero subsidy. That's why I love this agency. It should not operate its loan program at a cost to taxpayers, but because they had lowered the lending guardrails, it was going off the tracks to the tune of $400 million a year and growing. We had doubled the workforce during the pandemic to 7,000 employees, 90% of which worked from home for 4 years. So we just saw wasteful spending after wasteful spending. There was challenges in our disaster loan programs. They decided not to lend to faith-based organizations recovering from a disaster. I know in Texas that would have meant 12 churches could not have gotten a disaster relief loan that they legally were entitled to according to the Supreme Court. So we've restored religious organizations' ability to get disaster recovery loans. So look, there were so many things, and maybe Ulrich and I will go through some of those in our conversations, but that agency is probably, President Trump and I often talk about this, the biggest bank in government. Well, it had not passed an audit in 4 years. It was sitting on billions of dollars of uninvestigated fraud, and the previous administration had attempted to forgive the fraudulent loans on the backs of taxpayers. So from day one, we obviously rolled up our sleeves, got SBA back on the right track. It's an approach that any of you in this room would take, just saying, okay, there's a problem, let's fix it. We got everyone back to in-office work. We took the workforce back down to pre-pandemic levels and went through our expenditures, just combed through them line by line. We found hundreds of contracts that had been signed with a ceiling value of $3 billion that were not being used at all. So we were able to save billions just in our first few months. We've made sure that the offices that we have across the country, we have 68 regional offices. Our regional administrator, Tyler, is here. He covers a 5-state region here. We've got 10 regional offices, 68 district offices. We've made sure that we are in the field with our small businesses, not sitting in Washington. That's been a really important step. And we've also investigated a lot of that fraud, the pandemic fraud, where we found 600 million in pandemic-era loans that were meant for small businesses, went to people over the age of 115 or below the age of 11. So obviously a lot of fraud in that instance. And the list of that goes on. I mean, we found bribery schemes inside getting hundreds of millions of dollars of government contracts. I've ordered a 15-year audit, look back on that program. So we're going to make sure that taxpayers and small businesses trust this agency to work for them again. Now, I will tell you, some of the latest work we've done, we're definitely focused on the benefits of the One Big Beautiful Bill, or as I like to call it, rocket fuel. Obviously, it's important to get that certainty for small businesses. I've traveled across 23 states so far, many of them twice. And what I've heard from small businesses is we need tax certainty, that the 20% pass-through deduction, that 199A, that they need to know that's going to be there. It's 100% expensing for capital investments, so we're poised for a capital expenditure boom in this country. But it's a pro-worker bill, and that helps small businesses so much because they're all looking for skilled labor to get those workers into our economy, to create that American dream. And it extends far beyond no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, tax credits for Social Security, where 88% of our seniors won't be paying taxes on Social Security now. It extends to working families. The child tax credit is doubled. That's 40 million families that will have an increase on the child tax credit. The standard deduction goes up. That's 91% of taxpayers that will see lower taxes. The average worker's take-home pay goes up by $7,000, and the average working family will have $10,000 more a year in their bank account. That is vitally important because that's the other pain point from small businesses. It's not just taxes and regulation and high interest rates, which I'm confident will hopefully be coming down soon, because that is the new thing that I'm hearing from them, but the focus on getting a skilled workforce that they can grow their business with. So I will just kind of wrap up here saying one of my most exciting initiatives is our Made in America Manufacturing Initiative. And as I mentioned, most manufacturers are small businesses. And I've been in some incredible factories that I'm sure Ulrich and I will have a moment to talk about. But what does that mean? It means that after we lost 70,000 factories in this country over the last 30 years, we drained the labor force of manufacturing skilled labor by 5 million, shipped it overseas. We now have a fair trade agenda that is not only creating tariff revenue to the tune of about $100 billion a month that resulted in a $30 billion surplus, the first surplus, a budget surplus we've had in almost 100 months in this country, but it is creating a dialogue between countries that have erected trade barriers against our small businesses and said, we are not taking your goods in, but we are shipping our stuff to you. So what that does is say, it changes the conversation. It brings small businesses opportunities to export, which all of our small manufacturers want that. They're so capable. And my small manufacturers are telling me, we have foreign companies coming over saying they want to manufacture in America already before many of the trade deals have been announced. And there's going to be a lot of those between this and next week. So I'll just kind of wrap up here by saying we're also helping small businesses create onshore supply chains on our website. If you're interested in getting a U.S. supplier, we have a free directory that the SBA has licensed. It's 1 million American-based suppliers of components, of parts, of food, of beverages, inputs, raw materials. And a lot of times people say, but we don't make stuff anymore. Well, tell that to the thousands and thousands of factories, 600,000 factories we have in this country, these hardworking men and women. And I've seen factories with as few as 10 that are making parts for our defense industrial complex or medical device. The advanced manufacturing, AI-driven robotics, and the efficiencies that we have in this country are unbelievable. And we certainly want that happening here and not overseas. So I'll close with our own performance metrics, which as a former head of investor relations, I'm used to reporting on this performance. So when you take the agency down by half, you cut the spending, we have driven our loan volume up 15% year over year in the first 6 months. We are doing about 2,000 Main Street loans each and every week. We're doing about 100 manufacturing loans a week. Those are both records. So we're able to have record performance, being more lean, more nimble, more focused on small business. And just like a small business, we are going to do more with less. And we do have the full weight of the Trump administration behind small business. This is such an honor to be part of this cabinet, to think about having a cabinet that has, most people have private sector experience. Most people have those wins and losses to have learned from in the private sector. And it's just really an incredible group to work with. So I will say that not only is it a new day at the SBA, but I think it's a new day in this great country. I think people will see the benefits of this agenda. If already seeing it now, but very, very soon we're going to see a lot of growth that isn't even anticipated. I know when they said the one big beautiful bill is going to cost us and it's going to drive up our deficit and debt, well, it's going to be driving growth at the levels that we haven't seen, and it's going to be happening in places like Georgia because of what all of you do to make this a pro-business, a welcoming community, a community that says, if you want to come do business here, bring jobs, educate students, raise families, worship, you can do that all here in Georgia. So small business has a huge role to play in that. I was at the White House with a group of business leaders that were investing $50 billion. They were collectively bringing $50 billion to tell the president. And I sat by the head of a major pharmaceutical, and he said, we can't deploy this without small businesses. We have the resources and the brand, and then we contract with dozens of small businesses to do this. So it's a very positive time to be in the small business community. It's a very optimistic time, and they are going to have the full support of the Trump administration behind them. So thank you so much for having me today. It's very humbling, and look forward to our conversation, and maybe we'll do some Q&A after. So God bless you. Thank you so much.
Hopefully these are turned on. Perfect. Thank you. Kelly, thanks again for taking the time to visit with us today and sharing some of your thoughts about your priorities, your goals, and the work that you're doing as the new SBA administrator. As I was thinking about this conversation, I thought it's hard to believe that less than a year ago, you and I had a chat as we were co-hosting a fundraiser for the president. And an awful lot has happened in the world. An awful lot has happened in our country, and an awful lot has happened to you personally in the intervening time. I thought it might be interesting for the club to hear a little bit about all that you've been through and what led you to the role that you're in and the work that you're doing for the American people.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time right now. When you think back a year ago, it both seems like yesterday and 100 years ago. And certainly when you think July, where we were, the attempt on the president's life, the RNC convention, all the events leading up to the election. What really took us to that moment of, I think, the president's election was, the challenges that our country was going through. I mean, we had massive inflation, the low growth, and I was very involved on the ground after 2020 in terms of starting a conservative voter registration, diverse community outreach, election integrity organization, because I saw what happened in 2020, and particularly in our state, and I just said, we've got to have more clarity on a path forward, more unity, invite more people into the conservative movement. Built that for 4 years after I left the Senate, started a small tech company, did some other things, and always had stayed with the president for those 4 years, supporting his efforts. But I think the biggest thing was the fact that I was a small business person that had helped take small companies into large companies, had succeeded and failed at business. I knew like the world of small business and have built a great relationship with the president through being with him when I was in the Senate and then obviously out on the campaign. But, you know, I think the biggest thing was the president wanted people in his cabinet that understood the stakes for the American people. And truly what I brought to Washington the first time around was being that young girl on a farm that didn't know if anyone knew I was out here or even cared. And I know that feeling of being someone in a rural community. I grew up in a house with no air conditioning, no air conditioning anywhere, no heat upstairs in central Illinois in the winter. So we relied on the heat to come up. And I just remember thinking someday we are gonna break through. And I so badly want that for everyone. And that's why I think Jeff and I have been in this kind of dialogue of politics. It's tough to get into, but once you get into, it's tough to get out of because you know the stakes. And we want everyone to be able to live the American dream. So just persisting on that path and really doing the service that it takes to deliver.
Awesome, thank you. I was going to ask a question about the big beautiful bill and maybe a little bit on the fraud and abuse things. If we have time, I'll come back to those, but maybe move on. We've all heard about the Department of Government Efficiency, otherwise known as DOGE, and I thought it might be interesting for the club to hear a little bit about what DOGE was doing at the SBA and the impact that it's had and what you see going forward.
Yeah, I think DOGE has been, I mean, when you think about what that was designed to do, it was designed to make sure that taxpayer money was spent responsibly. And it was, and is, a group of business leaders that have, in many cases, dedicated their time to come in and amplify the work of President Trump's cabinet in reviewing what's going on at the agencies. I mean, I run a now, 5,000 person agency at this level. It's considered small. And in what world is 5,000 small? So I have colleagues, Doug Collins runs a multi-100,000 person agency at the VA, and he's doing a great job. But look, the DOGE effort has been wrongly maligned because what they're doing is looking at the data, giving us chances to weigh in on information that we would have never been able to get. So, how did I know that we had 250 contracts totaling $3 billion? Because they went line by line and looked at every contract and realized we had 10 software vendors providing 10,000 seat licenses. Not one of them had ever been used. Why do you work the first 4 months of the year to send your money to Washington for something that's not being used? And so people might say, well, $3 billion, that's a drop in the bucket. Well, at what point is a number too small to matter? It's the same reason we've gone after fraud, because when you look at hundreds of millions or hundreds of billions of fraud, at what point do we draw the line and just say this isn't fair to ask hardworking Americans to fund these programs that are wasteful or fraudulent? And that's really where DOGE has been great. And we have our DOGE partner is an SBA employee. They've been fully vetted like everyone else, and they have provided tremendous value. That's how we've already been able to save billions of dollars and deliver more for small businesses and taxpayers with less.
Thank you. I know the club has had previous programs where we've talked about tariffs and trade, and so that's obviously on the mind of many small business people. Would love to have your thoughts on what you're doing to help them adjust, really, and how fair trade practices impact small businesses. Yeah,
fair trade is the word you should think of when you hear tariffs, because if you've seen Jamison Greer, he's the U.S. trade rep. He's a member of cabinet. He published a 400-page book about all the tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers enacted against America. And then on one sheet, you can show the tariff and non-tariff trade barriers that the U.S. has enacted against the world. We have told everyone, you can come in, flood our market with cheap goods. We won't tariff you, and if we do, it won't be very much. But then if we try to send them our pickup trucks or our medical devices or our pharmaceuticals, they say, oh, we're going to have to put up this wall. So, well, they want to take our pharmaceuticals very cheaply, but the rest of it, no. But what this does is level the playing field for those small manufacturers. I was in a small manufacturer in Detroit last week. He's got 13 employees. He produces millions of component parts for major equipment and aerospace suppliers every single month. He's doing it with 13 employees. He's going to hire 2 more employees, and now that the bill has passed, he's going to be able to buy another CNC machine for his plasma cutting so that he can get more business to come in. This is what and now he's getting, I mentioned people coming from overseas saying, we'd like to manufacture here, can you expand? So we are empowering our business community, our small business leaders, and these are American-made products, which the consumer has a preference for. And no matter what the space is, whether it's 2A or pharmaceutical or aerospace, anything, people have a preference for made in America. We should encourage that and invest in it.
I appreciate that, Madam Administrator. I've got a couple pages worth of questions here, but I know you've got a hard schedule to stick to, and I think we wanted to try to do 1 or 2 questions, so let me turn it back over to President Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Administrator Loeffler. If anybody has a question, and any Rotary member, it's restricted to Rotary members, has a question, if they could step up to the podium, that would be great. I think we probably only have time for 1 question as she's got a very tight schedule. We have somebody coming.
Thank you for speaking with us. I think it's very encouraging. My name's Adam Mathis. You mentioned something about workforce willingness, which drew my mind to a cousin I had who was working in a small manufacturing plant in Columbia, South Carolina, when unemployment checks were greater than his earning capacity. So he quit. And then he was already struggling with an addiction, and within a year died. And so I see a link between addiction and opioids and workforce willingness. And I also read something about how Mexico has already pretty much stopped the shipment of fentanyl into the US, which I think is kind of amazing to happen so quickly. Is there some sort of link and some sort of influence that the Small Business Administration can make between workforce and opioids and addiction?
Adam, thank you for that. It's incredibly important, and that's the opioid challenges, fentanyl, is exactly why President Trump imposed some of the tariffs to stop the flow of that, sealed the border, and said we've got to protect those that are vulnerable to this terrible blight for our families. And my heart goes out to everyone who's been impacted, and I know so many have. But I will tell you, our focus on workforce readiness, workforce availability skills, is going to go deeply into that. Last week, we're just getting started on the skilled workforce piece. I signed an MOU with the Department of Labor to focus on areas where we can strengthen that skilled workforce. We're going to be doing another one with MAHA and thinking about how do we use HHS and those resources to get people healthy back into the workforce, because that's incredibly important, and that's important to the president too. So I appreciate you raising that. It will be, and I think we have a huge opportunity in this country to create the right incentives for employers and workers to be welcomed back into the workforce, to learn those skilled trades. And there's never been a time like this in our country when you look at the manufacturing base expanding, when you look at AI, the ability for us to refocus on trade schools. There's 2 provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill incentivizing trade schools to get people back on that opportunity for success, using 529 and Pell Grant money for trade school. So we've got to reach out to people, make sure they're healthy and able to come back. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So I'm going to keep you on time. Thank you very much for joining us. You have an incredibly important job. The thriving of the Small Business Administration is really important to our communities, and our focus is community. So thank you very much for being with us today. So next week, our program will be a panel on not-for-profits. Nan, go ahead and get your picture. I'm going to keep talking. And how not-for-profits are pivoting their business models. And week after that, we've got Ambassador Michelle Taylor, and then the week after that, we have Clyde Higgs. So thank you all for joining us. We're adjourned.